Hello and welcome to the stream. My name is Lee and we are live. Hang on, let me do a few. First, stop the beeps before they start because otherwise. Yep. Okay. We got that going for us. Then I think what we can do is pop over to a few other friends and let me just check something real quick. I guess we're doing this. We're not doing that. Okay, in which case we're gonna go boppity boop, in which case that's not happening right. Um, let me just go to... All right. Sorry, I'm plopping that down. And we're going to another boppity boop, if you will indulge me for a little bit. Boom. Okay, hi! Hello, and welcome to the stream. As I promised, I would do a stream on Cyberpunk Red today, so we're gonna go find the Cyberpunk, if I can find it. There we go. That one. Boom. Okay. I promised I would do a Cyberpunk stream, Red stream today. Oh, that's fun. Session notes are always useful. I saw the what was it? The announcement of the block schedule, and I thought I was missing Tears of Air, and then I remembered it was Saturday, not Sunday, so I wasn't. But it's the dryer. Okay. What I need to do for now is boop that open. There we go. Cyberpunk time. Okay. Let me just bop this open a little bit so I can read better. Writing is insane. I am trying for NaNoWriMo and also, like, chipping away at the epic tragedy of the gibbering mouther with the fire giant in the cave when they have to get attacked by a harpy. No, that's okay. I had, I emptied the dishwasher out instead, so I actually got something useful done because of it. So, that works. And we're running the stream now, so if it were that, we wouldn't be able to run the stream now because I'm not going to stream over Blue Box. Alright, so we got contributors because I know. Here, look, I'll show you. I got this one, and it is slowly but surely coming along. It's fine. I know I'm very slow writing it up. I also owe a sock of holding stats, because at the con game last year, they stole a sock from a random NPC. Her name was Laura. It was a really nice tan stocking, her fancy going out stockings, about just under the knee length for a woman with size 10 feet roughly, and it had a little bow on it, and they used magic to run the spinning wheels to make it more efficient at, spinning. Yeah, luckily I'm not the only one writing, which is always good. And so I said there was some residual magic when they cast Detect Magic because of the thread was made with magic, and they kind of took it and ran with it, and she was keeping a gold piece in her sock, and then they assumed it was the sock of holding, and they just spun it like, I'm like, no, it's just a regular sock that happened to been made with magic. It's not, magical in and of itself. Ugh. But no one believes me, so now I finally agreed to stat up a sock of holding after pressure from Blue Box himself. It was an intensive one. Oh. Wait. Has quiet. It's okay, so notices. Gotta keep the tensing consistent. It's also NaNoWriMo, which is always a fun time. Think Ranger had a short bow. Boom. Okay. Hit save. My plan, though, for today was Cyberpunk Red, because Cyberpunk Red is really cool. But, alright. Never... Oh, yes. Ooh, street slang. Start with this. Time of the Red. A slang term for the period between 2023 and the late... Which, to be fair, is about to happen. I mean, 2023 is a year away. So, to the late 2040s, taken from the red skies common throughout the world as the after effect of the fourth corporate war. Well, we haven't had the first three yet, so we're, at least not openly, so we're in a good place. AV, common slang for aerodyne, an automobile-like vehicle powered by ducted jet fans. Oh. Someone pronounced this as NSYNC recently, apparently, and made someone on TikTok, and made all of us feel old. But that is AI is artificial intelligence, a computer with full self-awareness. Pretty cool. Beaverville is a safe suburban neighborhood primarily inhabited by mid-level corporate executives and their families. Bonanza, a location of a big score like an abandoned corporate facility. Booster, any member of a gang that affects cyberware, leather clothing, and random violence. So it's kind of a vibe. Sorta. Combat drugs, any one of a series of designer drugs created to increase speed, stamina, and reflexes. Chilled, to be cool, to be together. Cool beans. A chip, which is any type of data recording, usually taken in the form of a small colored slivers of plastic. Chip it in, to buy cyberware for the first time, to cast your lot with a group, to connect with the machine. Chumbada, or chumba, a Neo-African slang for friend or family member. Chew2, which is CHOOH2, the chemical formula. Street slang for alcohol, used to power vehicles and power plants. The vast majority of vehicles in the time of the Red are fueled by advanced form of alcohol with a higher burning temperature than normal methanol. Probably don't want to drink Chew2, although there's probably some people crazy enough to try. Cromer is a 21st century heavy metal rock fan. See also chromatic rock, a type of heavy metal characterized by heavy electronics, simple rhythms, and violent lyrics. Conapt, a condominium apartment in a corporate zone. Cybered up, to get as much cyberware implanted as possible before going over the edge. Data term, a street corner information machine with screen, CityNet inputs, and a keyboard. Dwarfs, street thing for synthetic endorphins, a designer drug that increases healing powers, limits fatigue, and produces a rush like a second wind. Yes, synthetic endorphins sound nice, honestly. Exotic, a human biosculpted with non-human elements, fur, long ears, fangs, etc. I think when we recast Valda's character, I'm working on for one of Sig's worlds that we're doing a roleplay co-writing. I think we recast him as an exotic with puppy ears and a tail, because the face is a representative of a megacorporation for legal purposes. Flatline, which is to kill, or a dead person or a thing, so it can be used as a noun or a verb. Go Leo, to make the trip into low Earth orbit to visit one of the inner space stations! Fun fact, it has been since the year 2000 that the entirety of humanity has been on this one ball. Since then, there's always been at least one person in orbit, which means that was the last time we were all on the same planet together. Which is pretty neat if you think about it. Gyro. A small 1 or 2 seat helicopters, like a gyrocopter. That one we have today. Used mostly in police work and corporate strike operations. Handle. A nickname, a working name you are known by on the street. Similar. Hydro. Street slang for hydrogen fuel. Used to power some vehicles in the 2000s. Input-output. Mechanistic term for a casual lover. Like a friend with benefits. Probably. Deal. Keyboard. Street slang for a computer interface with manual keys. Also a terminal. That's true, though. A lot of... Even now. I mean, we're not at Cyberpunk levels yet. Give it a couple years. Like, half of my mom's siblings have bionic replacement parts. Which, you know... but we also have there's a lot of computer devices that do not have manual keyboards anymore. Which is kind of cool. In a way. There's Combi, which is a large vehicle capable of carrying cargo and passengers. Popularly used by nomads as housing on the road. Lawman. Police officer or other law enforcers. Originally derived from Captain Max Hammerstand's post-war police task force known on the street as the Lawmen. This street slang has come to be synonymous with any and all law enforcers. Mainline, a term for your partner in a serious long-term relationship. Meat space, a term commonly used by netrunners to refer to the physical world. I mean, that's fair. Midnight market, top secret temporary marketplaces set up in high-level fixers to sell highly illegal goods. Powerful members of criminal underworld often hold their meetings in private rooms at a midnight market. Netrun, to interface with a net architecture and hack into its programs and controls. Also used to refer to running on the old net until the advent of the Fourth Corporate War. Night market is off-the-grid temporary marketplaces, so it's basically a lesser form of a midnight market, I would guess, and or a slightly different term for the same thing. Temporary marketplaces set up by groups of fixers with solid connections. In the time of the Red, a night market is the best place to find new cyberware and gear. Polymer one-shot, any cheap plastic pistol, usually in the 5 to 9 millimeter ranges. No, I did not want that. Fun fact, we actually have them already. You can 3D print guns and they fall apart after one use. So, these things already exist. I don't know if you can buy them. You have to print them yourselves, honestly. But, it's a thing. We're getting closer and closer to Cyberpunk every day. Poser gang. Any group whose members affect a specific look, style, or body sculpt job. Rabids. Rabids. A particularly deadly form of black ice spread throughout the old net after death. Their creator, net running legend, Rock Bartmoss. A surgeon specializing in implanting illegal cyberware. Ripperdoc. That'd be fun. Ronin, a freelance assassin or mercenary, usually considered to be untrustworthy. Samurai, a corporate assassin or mercenary hired to protect corporation property or make strikes against other corporate holdings. Slamodon, to get violent or to attack someone without reason. The street, wherever you live, late at night. Also the subculture, the underground. It's, again, a vibe, as opposed to a street, out on the street, which is kind of a term we use now. Stuff it. To have sex. Also, to forget about something. Interesting. Ooh. Image is always fun. Ooh, this is like a news video. This is cool. This is a, Body Lotto, Scott Brown. Scott Brown. Oh, so there's, I know it probably is reference to a Cyberpunk thing specifically, but Scott Brown was actually a senator from Massachusetts. He held in, I want to say Elizabeth Warren's place in a special election. He went out, and, I want to say he was holding out. Then he went to New Hampshire. He didn't win there, but, yeah, he was a temporary senator from Massachusetts. I remember distinctly. I grew up in Massachusetts. Local politician. N54's 24/7 essential news feed. Combat Cab Classic Season 13. Tom and Gold. TNG. The line between reality-driven entertainment and situational comedy blurs in this award-winning hit of 2044. When pop media sensation Gold leaves the corporate-driven music world and returns to her roots in Night City slum she grew up in, she befriends 4th Corp War combat veteran and hardware store manager Tom. Together with an AI-driven car named Tiger, they'll discover what it means to really live in a world where everyone else is just trying to survive. Sponsored by Zarifa. Connecting your best possible self, agent, data pool, your best possible result. 100%. Do not ask questions, just trust the system, because it works every time. Wow. Visit data pool site for device-specific app compatibility. Cigarette. I feel like that's a vibe. Sorry. This is just really cool artwork also. Soul in the Machine. The cyberpunk world is a violent, dangerous place filled with people who'd love to rip your arms off and eat them. The traditional concept of good and evil have been replaced by values of expedience. You do what you have to survive. It is new time, bad time, red time. This is essentially true, especially true in the time of the Red, when a massive war between megacorporations and an atomic bombing have ravaged what little vestiges of civilization would be familiar to people in society today. The rule is it's always personal. Survival is a personal thing and the hallmark of these dark times. But there's a wider aspect to that. You look to your friends, team, family, or clan first. If you can do some good along the way, great, but don't count on it. Cyberpunk characters are survivors in a tough, grim world faced with life and death choices. And they make these choices has a lot to do with whether or not they end up as vicious animals roaming a ruined world or retain something of their basic humanity. Cyberpunk characters are heroes of a bad situation working to make it better, or at least survivable, whenever they can. Whether it takes committing crimes, defying authority, or even outright revolution, the quintessential cyberpunk character is a rebel with a cause. It's interesting. A cyberpunk role player, it's up to you to find that cause and go to the wall with it. This is the essence of cyberpunk, playing your character with the proper disaffected, cynical yet idealistic style. Whether you're a biker with leathered skin and metal claws, or debutante in satin sporting the latest in designer cyber optics, you're going to need a certain panache, a certain flair in portraying yourself. To achieve the essence of the 2000s, you need to master 3 concepts. Style over substance. It doesn't matter how well you do something as long as you look good doing it. If you're going to blow it, make sure you look like you planned it that way. Normally, clothes and looks don't matter in adventure. In this world, having a leather armor jacket and microshades is a serious consideration. Attitude is everything. It's truth. Think dangerous, be dangerous. Think weak, be weak. Remember, everyone in the 2000s carries lots of lethal hardware. Each character in this world is playing a role, a face that the person projects to the outside world as the real thing. They won't be impressed by your new Militech smart gun unless you swagger into the club looking like you know how to use it. And you're just itching for an excuse. Never walk into a room when you can stride it. Never look at someone unless you can make it your best killer look. Use your best I'm bad and you aren't smile. Don't sit around in a flat or queue waiting for the next job. Get out and hit the clubs and hangouts. Make sure you're where the party starts. This is why Valdez is not set out for this world. But he finds his way in it. Sure, attitude is everything, but he's created the exact right attitude that makes people not want to kill him, which, to be fair, is a useful skill set. It's not a badass attitude, though. Live on the edge. The edge is that nebulous zone where risk takers and high rollers go. On the edge, you'll risk your cash, your rep, even your life on something as vague as a principle or a big score. As a cyberpunk, you want to be in on the action. Start the rebellion. Light the fire. Join great causes and fight for big issues. Never drive slow when you can drive fast. Throw yourself up against danger and take it head on. Never play it too safe. Stay committed to the edge. The rules. Style over substance. Attitude is everything. Live on the edge. Break the rules. Even after a massive war between mega corporations followed by an atomic bombing... Oops, sorry. That was uncouth. The world of Cyberpunk is a combination of savage, sophisticated, modern, and retrograde. Fashion model, beautiful rocker boys rub shoulders with battle-armored road warriors, all of them making the scene in the hottest dance clubs, sleaziest bars, and meanest streets of this side of post-Holocaust. And every single one of them has a role, an occupation they are known for on the streets. There are 10 roles in Cyberpunk Red Future: rocker boys, solos, netrunners, techs, medtechs, medias, XX, lawmen, fixers, and nomads. Rocker boys, rock and roll rebels who use performance, art, and rhetoric to fight authority. Solos, assassins, bodyguards, killers, and soldiers for hire in a lawless new world. Netrunners, cybernetic master hackers of the post-net world and brain-burning secret stealers. Techs, renegade mechanics and super tech inventors, the people who make the dark future run. Metatechs, unsanctioned street doctors and cyberware medics, patching up meat and metal alike. Medias, reporters and media stars, social influencers risking it all for the truth. Or glory. Sorry, the more I read about this, the more it's like, yeah, we have that. We have that vibe. We have some of this stuff already. We just, it's right on the tip. And honestly, that is not a good thing. I don't think. But, we live in a society, as it's been said. Execs, corporate power brokers, and business raiders fighting to restore the rule of the megacorps. Lawmen, maximum law enforcers patrolling the mean streets and barbarian warrior highways beyond. Fixers, dealmakers, organizers, and information brokers in post-war midnight markets of the street. Nomads, transport experts, ultimate road warriors, pirates, and smugglers who keep the world connected. The question is, who do the lawmen work for? Like, who is nominally the government, and how do they how does corporate maintain power against them? That's an interesting question, because that ultimately might be, like, we have corporations with enough resources to go to war, and none of them have bombed, well, okay, that's not true. They usually don't bomb each other in reasonable nations of the Western Hemisphere. The global North, I think it's what they call it. In other places, not so much. There's sabotage, and they always kind of cover their tracks. Corporate sabotage is absolutely a thing, but they haven't had all-out war yet. And the question is, how close are we to all-out war? Because at what the megacorps are trying to regain their corporate status, right? The megacorps of today have enough money to do this. They just don't. And the question is, why don't they? Is it because it's more profitable for them to not? Like, this is an interesting question that worth noting. Each role will give you access to a role ability, which will help you navigate the streets of the dark future. We'll talk about these in the role ability section, but for now you can mark down the name of your chosen role ability and note that it starts with a value of 4, which represents the years you've spent on the streets already. Rocker Boy. My old man tried to do music back before the war. The corpse snapped him up, sucked him dry, and spit him out to die on the street. These days, it's different. I write my own lyrics, make my own arrangements, record it all myself, then upload it to the data pool. No corp needed. They're not changing my name in chanting my name in giant concert hall yet, but I've got fans, and I don't have to compromise my message for anyone. Just like the original Rocker Boy, my music's giving the middle finger to every power-hungry slut who thinks they can control the world. Oh, wow. Sorry. There is, in this day and age, the rise of independent producers outside the studio system. Sorry. It's weird to read a Cyberpunk source book and be like, wow, okay, we have this already. But, it's interesting. Yeah. I might have misjudged the timing of the stream. I probably should have made more mention of what time I was going to be streaming. But that's okay. Boom. If you live to rock, this is where you belong. Hang on. Before we do class, let's see if there's any other setting information that we could tap into. Or we could go to Lawman and see what the Lawman deal is. That might be worth doing. Oh, the fall of... Oh, here we go. Dark Future Countdown. The Aftermath. Oh, okay. Ooh, here we go. There's a whole lore section. Alright. Wound states and critical stabilize. Okay, so we got 3 methods of making a character. Tales from the Street. Fitted for the... Okay, we're going to go to page 43 for Tales from the Street. And then we're going to actually read the... Oh, running the life path. It's like climbing out of a clone vat. If cloning worked that way, it is. You get this half-formed person standing there, dripping with slime. Maybe you've got a vague idea of where you're going with this character, but nothing else. So how do you take this blank and make them really cyberpunk? You start with the life path. Life path is a flowchart of plot complications designed to help you give your cyberpunk character an an authentically dark future background. It section covers your culture, origins, your family, friends, enemies, personal habits, and even key life events. It's intended primarily as a guide. If you encounter something you don't think fits the character you've envisioned, feel free to change the path as you see fit. And remember, Cyberpunk hinges on role-playing, so make use of the information in your life path run. It's guaranteed adventure generator. I think we did a life path for Valdez. Alright. It's a very cool thing, but it's not what we're looking for. We're looking for lore information, not character creation. Not that character creation isn't cool, mind, but... 233. Alright, this is where it gets interesting. You ready? Pay attention, punk. My old man used to say history will bite you in the ass if you don't learn about it. It's like a rabid dog that will go after you if you keep going back to its hideout. So, I'm going to fill you in with some history you'd better learn pronto now that you're on the street, because you do not want to get bit by this beast. Tres Santiago. How did it get so bad? Alright, so this is an alternate history, but probably got an interesting grain of truth, because I want to... This is what separates our world from their world, because we have a lot of the same instances, and it's... Alright. By the end of the 1980s, it was evident that the United States was in trouble. Most social norms had dissolved under an all-engulfing wave of competing special interest groups, media-fueled fads, and an overall me-first worldview. Reaganomics. Sorry. Goddamn Reaganomics. Sorry. It's just fucking Reaganomics. I won't get political, but just saying. By 1994, the number of homeless on the street had skyrocketed to 21 million. The technical revolution had further torn the economy apart, creating two rapidly divergent classes. A wealthy, technically oriented, material, acquisitive group of corporate professionals and a down class of homeless, unskilled, blue-collar workers. A middle class that was nearly eradicated. This was the dismal beginning that led to the American landscape of the 2000s. Here are just a few of the major trends leading to the collapse of the American nation. Okay, here's the thing, though. The modern wealth inequality is climbing, so technically... Well, anyway. In large cities, business areas were clean, neat, well-lit showcases free of crime and poverty controlled by powerful corporations. Ringing the central areas were combat zones, decrepit, squalid suburbs, and burned-out ghettos teeming with booster gangs and other violent sociopaths. The outer suburbs were also corporate-controlled zones, safe, well-guarded tracts where executives raised their families in relative security. Under the corrupt rule of the Gang of Four, a cabal of 4 government agencies, NSA, CIA, DEA, and the FBI, all led by a brilliant and psychopathic vice president. Alright, so we didn't have... That might be where it went wrong, with the right vice president that kind of let the corporations off the hook more than our world did. American government descended into the realm of mobster rule. Ruthlessly pursuing its agenda of illicit profit above all, the gang hollowed out Social Security and Medicare. Eliminated welfare, unless tied to one of their corporate clients, and plundered the resources of the United States like a giant personal piggy bank. The only untouched area of the government was the military, which the gang lavished money upon to maintain service loyalty and the finance the gang's expansive policy of war-based imperialism. Wow, okay. By the time the gang was ousted, the U.S. Senate was no longer functional, having been subordinated or intimidated by the gang over the years. The Supreme Court was no longer the law of the land for the increasing numbers of self-declared free states. Oh, wow. So states started going. That's happens. Once the states start going, it's bad. We learned that in 1860. And most of the federal bureaucracy was in shambles, leaving the country unable to cope with the waves of crises devastating the population. Individual states, fed up with the ineffectual and dictatorial actions of the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and recently exposed machinations of the Gang of Four, began to break away from the main body of the country. First California, north and later south, then Texas. Texas didn't go first. Oregon, Washington, and the Dakotas. That's an interesting mix of states to leave. These new free states set their own laws, although most were remarkably similar, trade agreements, and most importantly, no longer sent their collected taxes back to Washington, D.C. This only hurried the collapse of the unified nation. You'd think Florida would be on that list. Actually, it would be fascinating to get more detailed lore and get a reasoning on why they picked those states to have gone out first. And did North and South Dakota clomb together into the Dakotas, or did they maintain 2 separate free states? And because California split in 2, which makes sense. California is a very, it makes sense culturally that California would be north and south, but given certain circumstances. But the Dakotas, did the Dakotas go as one? Because they're more likely to go as one, I think. Certainly as likely to merge as California is to split. Maybe a little less likely, but not that much less likely. Because it makes sense, given... I mean, the only problem would be the vast distances, but the similarities in culture between the 2 Dakotas is much more than the differences between California North and South. And California North and South have existed in one state for quite a while, and it's managing. So, very clearly, it would make sense that Dakotas would go, especially because they didn't list them separately. On the other hand, a lot of people in the rest of the country don't respect the Dakotas as 2 separate states because of their cultural similarities. Sorry. Unprepared to deal with the effects of the worldwide global warming, vast areas in the northern hemisphere began to suffer unending years of back-to-back drought. Yeah, we're seeing that, aren't we? Throughout the Midwestern United States, many small towns were abandoned as local farms, businesses, and banks collapsed in the wake of this drought, famine, and economic chaos. I mean, what farms had survived were eventually bought up by huge agri-corporations and were maintained with corporate-controlled wells, hired workers, machine labor, and well-equipped guards. Yeah, because agri-corporations are certainly not a thing that exists. Oh no, wouldn't have that. Midwest urban zones also suffered during this time, not from drought, but a collapse of manufacturing jobs and industry fleeing the country for cheaper labor in Asia and Africa. Which did happen, and yes, that is a thing that happened. That is uncannily true. I mean, yeah, Rust Belt. The whole Rust Belt thing is a thing. That is I mean, it already happened, though. That happened before, I mean, granted, supposedly started in the 80s, so it makes sense that a lot of the same things would happen because of similar pressures. The question is the rest of the world, though. That's an interesting... I'd like to hear... Well... Sorry, this is fascinating for me, personally. Yes, it's Cyberpunk Red. We're dissecting the history section. Welcome, Sig. You specifically requested Cyberpunk Red, and I owed you one more Saturday. And given a series of circumstances caused by my own stupidity, I had time free right now to stream, so we're streaming. But it's pretty awesome, honestly. We're starting with a little background history. Right, so the mega corporations bought out the farms, and we had the same collapse of manufacturing that led to Rust Belt BS. Unchecked corporate mergers. Yeah, we don't have antitrust laws anymore. It's a thing. And acquisitions destabilized entire areas of production, especially as well-heeled investors bought successful companies, then pillaged their assets and sold dried husk at pennies on the dollar to finance their debts. But hollowing out the center of the country had an unexpected series of costs. Of course, you'd think. Millions became homeless and were forced to travel open roads to seek shelter in urban zones in a latter-day version of the Dust Bowl period of the American 1930s. The open freeways soon became battlegrounds as armed packs of booster gangs also traveled from city to city, looting and pillaging as the homeless travelers like mechanized Visigoths. I mean, we already have highway robbery of this is just, every time I see this, I'm like, yeah, no shit, that happened. I mean, it's just slightly worse than what happened in our history, really. Which I guess is the point of Cyberpunk. Ooh, plagues. Many different plagues than our plague. I mean, so far. I mean, maybe we just got the plagues later, and that is what's gonna throw us off the edge. Maybe this is just, it happened faster than what our current... I mean, I don't like to think that way, but... An already overtaxed medical system found itself inundated by a series of plagues that swept the planet. Aided by easy and rapid transportation between countries, densely packed urban zones, and a willful tendency for the broken governments of the period to ignore and downplay the effects of medical emergencies. Ha! Like our country would ever do that. Oh no. Sorry. I'm still a little bitter about... Well, anyway. The hot zone spread like fusion-fed explosions, devastating entire continents. For example, the Washington wasting plague of 1999. Yeah, see, they just got their pandemics earlier. That's a whole other factor. Yeah, Cyberpunk 2020, and... Oh, shit, okay. That is a good question. I know it became alternate history at some point. And I think they republished Red recently, right? And, but they, first printing 2020. Oh, copyright 2020, right? But they had already created Cyberpunk 2020, and it was, different. So it became alternate history in the 80s. We had a particularly shitty vice president, apparently, that, and even looser corporate bullshit than we did then. I mean... Granted, the 90s, mega corporations just took longer to form, and we had the plague took later. That's... and I guess they probably were like, oh, yeah, plague, that would happen. I'm like, yeah, that did happen. Still happening, actually. People are still dying of COVID. It didn't just actually go away. It just... But my point on that nonsense was, yeah, it is an alternate history. I am curious as to why they picked those. They think those states would be the ones to go. The Dakotas, Washington, Oregon, and the split California. And is there any information on whether the Dakotas went as a pair or whether they went individually? Because I would be curious on that. Also, it'd be really fun to like dig into the history of why in this alternate version of history those particular states seceded. I mean, like, I get, and why not like Florida? Like, I get California, kind of. It's always trying to do it. Okay, so fair. Florida would be the other one I would think would secede. And maybe like Maine-ish. But Texas, obviously. Dakotas are maybe. Dakotas are an interesting choice. Washington for sure. Washington and Oregon, I can kind of see where that happened. I don't. That makes sense. That part of the country is always a little off. But the West Coast is, But like, I wouldn't imagine like chunks of, like, Florida's a big one, but the Dakotas, like, that's true, but that fits, at least in our timeline, that fits with how the government is running right now. So, and how it would run to create, unchecked corporate growth is a hallmark of the right wing. The old vestige of neoliberalism when they don't, and not enforcing the antitrust laws, which is kind of what led to our current BS, is not enforcing goddamn antitrust laws. But my point, at least according to my friend, who he actually understands how economy works, so I listen to him a lot on points, but, not everything, but my point is that, like, I would think the Dakotas would fit in with the new right-wing, like, the vibe of the federal government under this, which is similar to the one that's hopefully not coming back for now, but that's a whole other story. We have elections right around the corner. And we lost our place. I think it was over here somewhere. The dark future. But yeah. I would be curious to what drove the specific free states in this timeline to do. Like, I'm curious about the free states. That would be an interesting history project in and of itself. Rust Bowl, okay, yeah, that happened. I mean, it's not any different than our history, really, except it got worse, apparently, in this history. But, and there were more road violence, but the whole desecration of Rust Belt cities is common, Let's see. Yeah, hot stone spread like fusion-fed explosions, devastating entire continents. For example, wasting plague of 1999. Slowly, but hopefully we can, like, keep up with the slow things down before they get this bad version, so we get, like, a watered-down version of this hellhole. Maybe. We can hope, right? And work toward it. 1999, a horrible infection that attacked the intestines of its victim and made them starve to death no matter how much food they ate. Tore across Europe and landed in the United States. So kind of like Ebola, which is right now in Africa, but we are ignored in the Chaos Gang of Four's rule. It killed an estimated 14 million people before a vaccine was finally developed in Japan. I know. We do. And we're going to end up with more huddled masses yearning to breathe free in the U.S., and we have to accept that. I mean, they already are. They're coming by the boatloads already. It's just slowed down by current policies, but they are coming. It's happening. It's slow and steady. Trickle into Europe constantly. And the U.S. It's just a lot harder nowadays to go. Although Utah is really chill about refugees. Oh yeah, like I was saying when we were talking about the earlier corporate warfare stuff, big corporations in our time don't do corporate warfare in the U.S., but they do corporate warfare in Africa and South America. There is corporate warfare going on out there. I'm not naive enough to think there isn't. It's just not in the global north, I think is what they term for America and Europe. And chunks of northern Asia. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why they shipped it to Europe, but yeah, no, there is a lot of food does come from Ukraine, and they can't plant. That's another thing about the war in the Ukraine and the war in Russia, or the necessity of bringing Russian troops in. Putin's doing it, is that the two biggest grain-producing countries aren't running their harvest. I mean, okay, U.S. is, and U.S. feeds a huge chunk of the world, but we can't feed the entire world on U.S. produce alone. We can come close, but there are going to be people who starve because there's not enough grain to go around, because the Ukraine, which is supposed to be harvesting right now, is not, because it's being bombed instead. We have a huge problem with that. Yeah. Estimated 14 million people before a vaccine was finally developed in Japan. The wasting plague was only one of a series of epidemiological disasters that hampered the planet. Some natural, some bioengineered as part of various national programs. Each one was just another nail in the coffin of society already out of control. I mean, we only had one so far. That's true. We have a screw up in distribution of water, because it's not a worldwide drought, because there are floods in places like Alaska and Pakistan, which are not supposed to flood. But there's not water where in European rivers, which is where we need water. There's a lot of mismanagement on that front too. But anyway. Yeah. But no, but large amount of farmland out in the U.S. are producing a good chunk of the food we need. There's plenty for the U.S. It's just, it's going to be more expensive because it's getting sold off to other countries, which is a whole thing. But, yeah, it's not like the potato famine where there was plenty of food, it just got shipped out of the country. There's actually less to go around, at least worldwide. But, yeah. The Irish population of Ireland just got up to where it was 80 years ago. Just got back to pre-famine levels. Fun fact. So that's fun. Yes, the distribution of food is slowing down as well, because the Turkish, they're escorting a convoy of grain that Russia was gonna bomb, but the Turkish escort ships called the bluff and just kept going, and so far they're okay, at least from what I heard. But anyway. Humanity has always pushed back against natural limits. Maybe. Humanity has always pushed back against... No, Ireland... Dude, Ireland, do you know how many people in Ireland got killed in that famine? And most of the rest of them just went to the U.S., which is why we have so many Irish people in the U.S., myself included. My grandfather, was one of the huddled masses from Ireland. And we have whole families who still consider themselves Irish in heart, who grew up here because they left during the famine, because there was no food there, so they came here and got starved and miserable, but that's a whole other story. But my point is... Anyway, before I get too off topic, I'm trying to read about Cyberpunk and this version of the future, which, now there you go. So, all of them either died or came here, and it was a huge, huge number. I mean, 80 years. It took 80 years for the population to go back. That's how many people got killed or pushed out. Humanity has always pushed back against its limits. Poor eyesight, get glasses. Hearing failing or poor, get cochlear implant. Hip going out, replace it with a steel one. Which, yeah, that's true. At least over half of my mother's siblings have bionic parts now. It's intense. But by the late 20th century, the explosive levels of achievement in cybernetics from cyber, machine, and netics control opened up a new world of human potential. Now it became poor eyesight, replace those meat eyes with cyber optics that can see for miles in the dark and maybe even shoot lasers like a superhero. Hearing failing or poor, time to lever up enhanced audio suite that can hear sounds that only dogs or whales can hear. Hips going out, replace your entire skeleton with unbreakable, never wearing out steel. It's a new age. You can become part of it by endlessly improving yourself. Okay, so our tech, the rise of cybernetic technology is a little slower than this predicted. That's another thing. We do have more cyber tech than we did in the 80s, and yes, we do have much more intensive implants, but it's not as common as this predicted, which I think might have helped, might have hurt. I think it was neutral, but implants Also, yeah, like the ability of to get implants is not as much as predicted. I mean, yes, you can do enhancements, but they generally don't. And yeah, enhancements are kind of experimental tech at best, and generally barely at the level that this predicted in the 90s. Corporations and governments began to employ cybernetically enhanced warriors to patrol the streets and fight their wars. People with cybernetic enhancements found themselves becoming impatient with the unenhanced, and they're up to the cybered up painfully slow pace. Cybernetic spread allowed the rate of change or engagement with the rush of a shifting world of endless information to move still faster, lending greater levels of technoshock below in society. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we did improve a little bit. I mean, there are cool medical stuff that didn't exist back then, but yeah, it is a slow process of improving medical technology. LASIK surgery does exist, though, so you can get your eyes fixed instead of glasses. It's expensive, though, and not one size fits all, but it is a possibility. Let's see. People began to show signs of psychotic breaks, even eventually accumulating in a large plague of cybernetically driven murderous rampages called cyberpsychosis. And so one more log was added to the inferno-consuming society at the end of the 20th century. That's true. That is true. They definitely put, and, you know, anything that gets made does get locked behind paywall after paywall, and, you know, yeah, corporate, yeah, that's true. Corporations, instead of getting rich they found other ways to get rich than expanding technology exponentially, instead making technology harder to commune with. And then forcing people to, they invented problems and paywalls to make people pay more instead of making faster tech. So it kind of slowed down the progress. That is probably true. Although it does mean we don't get cyberpsychosis. And since we don't have that many cyber intents yet, it does, since we don't have so many cyber implants yet, we don't know if cyberpsychosis is going to be a thing. We have more than enough regular psychosis to go around to make up for it. Like, I don't think they predicted that we would just have mass shootings, not because of cyber tech, but because people just break in the brain sometimes and we have shitty mental health things. But I think that is an interesting play that they didn't. Yeah. That's true. And even if there were cures, they'd be so expensive because it's not common enough that the government is going to fight the price gouging on it. So the level of cure or possibility treatments you get is less than equal. I'll just say that. With the option to deploy cybernetically boosted super soldiers and unlimited military budget. Ah, yes. The Gang of Four was able to prosecute a series of foreign wars to start its new era of imperialism. I mean, like they aren't doing that anyway. Throughout the U.S. history, they've been doing that. But even with these advantages, the United States found itself dragged into a series of military quagmires with echoes of the Soviets in Afghanistan and the old U.S. and Vietnam. Our own thing in Afghanistan just ended, and Afghanistan collapsed not long after, but it's no longer our problem, which I feel bad for the Afghan people, but also they can handle it. I'm sure they can handle it on their own. And if they can't, well, we can't fix everything. True. But there's no guarantee that having that much, like, a detachment from humanity can be caused without... It's like metaphor. You know what I mean? Like, there's no guarantee that putting more mechanical parts in you will detach you from humanity. Any more than you won't get detached from humanity just by existing in the information age. Yeah, like, I don't think cybernetics is the cause, is what I mean. This became even worse as the targeted nations began to use terrorist strikes. Pocket nuke in New York. Well, no one's nuked New York yet, but it is a distinctive possibility that we live under. I mean, we had 9/11 and we had an airplane instead of a nuke, so, you know, there's that, but, I think they also underestimated the U.S.'s effort in anti-terrorism. That is to say, well, that's true, it doesn't help. Actually, though, it might. I wouldn't be so sure on that. But what I was saying, though, is, this future underestimates the U.S.'s, ability, like the Department of Homeland Security, which, it doesn't predict that we were able to quash terrorism as much as we did. Except we have domestic terrorism, but domestic terrorists are smaller scale and not as big galvanizing force, so we're pretty cool with that. But yeah, we have, by the time the cyber soldiers 10,000 fought its way back from Southam hellhole, the citizens of the United States were exponentially tired of the endless battles filling their nightly news. Oh, yes, absolutely, but there's more of it than you think. It's just concentrated in small pockets in a way that you don't see it as much as you do. And purposely downplayed as well. When the technological change outstrips people's ability to comprehend or fit it into their lives, it creates techno-shock, one of the major contributors to the social chaos that brought the collapse of the pre-cyberpunk world. Techno-shock always starts small. A useful gadget or tool here. A new and very directed communications method there. Information systems that allow governments and megacorps to watch and track you with surveillance or targeted advertisements to deliver what you want when you don't even know you want it. For your own good. Machines that adjust your sense of time and place to fit their needs. And it all happening faster and faster so that your mind is unable to process the changes and how it's affected. The younger you are, the easier it is for you to deal with the accelerating change. You're used to it because you were born into it. That's true. My roommate, who is very nice and amazing, cannot do internet at all. And I'm the one doing all our internet. And I grew up with internet. I had it before I was 10. And yeah, that is a huge factor. But sooner or later, even the kids can't keep up. Suddenly people freak out. They get irrational, violent. Families shatter. Relationships tear apart. People feel helpless in the face of the universe. Eventually the whole society grinds to a halt. The victims of mass psychosis. The vast majority of people, their lives uprooted and changed by the advancements, sat passively waiting for their leaders to tell them what to do next. Mega corporations provided a neo-feudal alternative to new and incomprehensible reality. One smaller group tried to turn back the pace, but found by founding the anti-technological Neo-Luddite movement. Yeah, that's true. But they're also folding down under their own weight. Which is lucky, because we really... yeah, no, there's definitely something to be said for that. But it hasn't happened on a massive enough scale that it's irreversible. Yet, is what I mean. And plus, a lot of that was actors on the dark web. It's not technology itself. It never was. It's people using technology to manipulate others. There is a little bit of cyberpsychosis going around, but it does get directed and tweaked by bad actors, and I think that's a... Wow, this is a very heavy stream. Sorry. It is an interesting a factor. I don't think they're... the way they describe it here, they're not factoring in as much as I think they could. Megacorporations, of course, being big ones. Let's see, New Luddite movement. Still others decided to immerse themselves in technological change. We'll see. I think it might get better. I have hope for the future. I mean, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I believe we can come to it's not going to end with a bang, but with a whimper. It's going to be slower and steadier, and we're not going to get to this point. We're going to get to somewhere else. I don't know where that's going to go, but Uh, it's getting there. You'll see. We'll see how it goes. There is pushback, and I think the pushback is changing the way people live, and I think that is helping a little bit. Still others decided to immerse themselves in technological changes. They coped by adding machines to themselves, enhancing their abilities and perceptions to allow themselves to catch up with the dizzying pace of the new, and earned themselves the nickname of edge runners or cyberpunks. A timeline for the dark future, 1990 to 2045. So in 1993, a secret coup launched by the Gang of Four, a coalition of government agencies led by the current vice president, effectively ends federal democracy in the United States. Okay, so this happened well earlier and more properly, more subtly than our own current bumbling attempts in 2020. In the late 20-teens, ending in 2020. So this happened 2 decades, 2010, 2 decades earlier, which I think definitely changed things. Effectively ends federal democracy in the U.S. Many states begin ignoring federal authority, declaring themselves free states. Well, okay, many is 4. So did 4 states secede, or did other states, that's what I want to know is which of the states seceded, and did some of them just kind of not secede? The first Central American conflict. American imperial ambitions justified as part of the war on communism. Ah, yes. That's the other thing they didn't predict. Because this was originally written in the 80s, communism still existing in the failure of the collapse of the Soviet Union probably led to, America had a lot of ugly involvement in South America, but it never directly intervened, and I think that's a big part of why our own, so it didn't predict the collapse of the Soviet Union and the success, basically, of U.S.'s efforts that got threw a lot of countries under the bus because they said, well, a dictator is better than a communist. Well, all those dictators killed millions of their own people, so do you really think it's better now? But, American imperial ambitions, justified as part of the war on communism, terrorism, and narcotics, killed hundreds of thousands. American veterans returned home dismembered and maimed, driving the demand for cyberware. Yeah, it didn't account for all... Well, okay, it probably accounted for all of the indirect stuff, but it assumed that it would... All the indirect BS that U.S. was pulling in South America because of the Monroe Doctrine would lead to something direct, and it never quite did. And that's probably a big turning point for that. Demand for cyberware. That and the earlier fascistification of the U.S., probably. Breakup of the Soviet states. Okay, breakup of the... From this point, the old USSR... Okay, here's an interesting question. So, the old USSR begins a new era of rapprochement with Western Europe. By the 2000s, the neo-Soviets are Europe theater's most powerful allies. Okay, that also predicted the bullshit that went on in the ex-Soviet states, because after it collapsed, it was ugly. None of the countries did well or were powerful. Ukraine, to be fair, Ukraine did pretty well for itself. Gained a lot of power and stability and was a prospering modern country. I mean, they weren't powerful allies or anything, but they were certainly doable. You know what I mean? But Russia? Russia did not do so well post-Soviet. And they, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, none of the stands did particularly well. The Baltic states did okay. None of them became, massive powerhouses, but they joined NATO, and they did well for themselves as independent countries, thriving and doing the best they could. Nothing, crazy. They weren't crazy powerful world actors, but they were, well-run countries with decently fed populace and not really too many problems. Russia was the big one, though, and that didn't do so well. None of the stands, Russia and the stands did not do so well. And I think that's... there are issues in Belarus. I mean, it did better than certain other countries, but it doesn't... Then we had, of course, the far-right push in the old Warsaw Pact states, but the Economic Control Zone. Euro Space Agency launches the Hermes space plane. Yes, also the collapse of the space travel as economics crunched. That was a big thing they didn't predict. The new space age is now rather than in the 80s. Yeah, that is another thing. The lack of the decline of the spacefaring programs. And then CH00H2 developed by Biotechnica. First arcology built in the ruins of Jersey City. 16 acros began Okay, ruins of Jersey City. Okay, Jersey City did not get destroyed. Luckily. It is still thriving. More or less. It's Jersey. It's not it's not as bad as people make out Jersey to be, but it's certainly not a prosperous, well-known city, but it's certainly, the residents aren't ruined, and therefore the arcologies might not be built. 16 acros began construction over the next 5 years until the collapse of 1996, leaving huge structures half completed, filled with squatters and homeless. Yes, that is the thing that happens, but I don't think we had that. 1992 established the European Economic Community. Okay, so they predicted the Eurozone, common currency, Eurodollars established. They predicted the Euro. Okay, so, yeah, the European Union. Okay, so European Union's found. Okay, basically, we had that too. Yeah, we're just comparing notes about history. We don't have any, sorry. We have 3 viewers. Also, anyone who's not SIG, if you want to pipe in, or even SIG if you want, but I know you're not afraid to pipe in if you want to. But yeah, what do you think of the world history and how it's presented? Did I get something wrong in our current history? I'm not an expert or historian by any means. If I got something wrong, it's not entirely impossible. But actually, give me 3 minutes. Less than 30 seconds, even. There we go. That should help. Ooh, I'm back. Okay. Yes, that should... There we go. A little better. Yeah, so the game predicted and just said it was an alternate history, which makes sense. Yeah, well, okay, true, if you live to 2050. Well, why don't you cross that bridge when you come to it in 2050? Yeah. We'll see in 2050. DEA. So the DEA developed bioweapons. Oh, hang on. They developed bio-plagues for plants. That is kind of awesome and kind of terrible. I'm not gonna lie. Although, the U.S. also, yeah, the U.S. DEA has... Not the DEA. Like, I don't think we have the... I think we have the level to create plagues for plants, just no one's done it yet. I'm pretty sure that kind of tech exists. But it's corporate, not U.S. funded. And no one has done it because it's not in any corporation's interest to... What they like to do is they sell you seeds and then they sell you for, like pesticides that only work on this particular plant. That's what they're using it for. Or to sterilize it, so you have to buy the seeds from them. Yeah, they're not using, they're not using it for, DEA. The ability to create plagues like that exists, but it's not being used by the DEA. Also, the U.S. government has money in drugs. Not in drugs in the U.S., they're combating those hard, but they have their fingers in pies. There are people in the U.S. government who benefit from having drugs, hard drugs exist, and I don't know if it has, actually. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, it definitely isn't used by the DEA. It's used by, it's concentrated in corporations, and corporations have very different interests. Their plagues are things that they alone can cure in crop plants. They spend their time improving crop plants and causing trouble in crop plants that they alone can solve, but, So, governments of Chile, Ecuador, Afghanistan collapse. I mean, yes, that is a thing that has happened. Chile, Ecuador, and I don't know specifically in Chile and Ecuador. All right, I know Argentina I know Venezuela is teetering on the brink right now because the oil. I know, yeah, Venezuela is shitty right now. But yeah, I can't specifically say for South America. My knowledge is not as deep as it should be, but let's see. Drug war breaks out between Eurocorp-backed dealers and the DEA all over the Americas. Okay, so it's suggested that drug kingpins, rather than being that they are getting backing from the European Union, rather than the European. Okay, yes, the European Union does legalize a lot of stuff that the U.S. doesn't, but that's in pursuit of their own efforts of they don't want the bullshit war on drugs because they've seen how much it costs and how bullshit it is in America. They just don't want that bullshit. That's why they're legalizing shit, not because they have any interest in propping up drug dealers. And I mean, it's quite possible. I have not read the article. If you can find it, I'd be fascinated by it, but I haven't heard that. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, like I said. And certainly the Afghan using cash crop of poppies is not something the U.S. Has benefits from. So it might be, it would certainly make sense to do so if they could. I just don't know if they can and did, is my question. I could see it happening. It's very, and I don't think the U.S. government has scruples, hypothetically, but some of their shadier branches absolutely would crash an economy. I do not doubt that. Okay, so biologic interface chips developed by Munich, United Germany. Okay. I mean, we have United Germany, we just don't call it United Germany because they just got back together and they're like, we're Germany again. They don't say United Germany because they're just Germany. But yeah, Munich, okay. We didn't invent that. High-energy laser lift arrays. Simple mass driver established at Canary Islands by European Space Agency. Yes, the whole space, the not, because after once the Soviet Union collapsed, the space race kind of died out, and so funding for space travel crashed across the board. Now, so it didn't progress as far as they're predicting it progressed, which means this laser array stuff never happened. Or rather, hasn't happened yet. It might. Also, fun fact, the future of space travel might be corporate, which is going to complicate the treaties that was signed in the 70s because, well, it's going to get complicated. Just saying. Yeah. Exactly. The poppies just, exactly, and the growers are not necessarily all Taliban pawns. They're actually Afghan farmers who are trying to do the best for their families, and then people, get screwed over. I mean, see, TRC biologic interface chips, which we haven't got yet. AV-4 Aerodyne assault vehicles developed to deal with increasing riots in U.S. urban zones. So I mean, it's not like we don't have drones for police riots, but police riots generally don't use drones so much now. We have riots, and we have bullshit that the police pull to deal with riots that is against the Geneva Convention. They are not legally required to follow the Geneva Convention, so if protesters set up aid stations, they are regularly targeted by police because they don't have the rule. They can't target medical people. And tear gas against the Geneva Convention. False surrender. There's a lot of bullshit that's against the Geneva Convention that the police pull. But we haven't seen a massive spike in drones to control riots, although, according to at least friends of mine who were at least alive at the time, the riots today are pale in comparison to the ones in the 60s. And yes, the riot police are overpowered, by all means, but I don't think they have drones yet. The Plops have drones, and they're building them, but it's been a much more modern thing. That's like post-2010, not 90s. Colombian drug lords detonate small tactical nuke. Oh, wow. Yeah, tactical nukes. See, that's... Alright. Yeah, we've had terrorist attacks, but we have not had drug lords get pissy enough to use nukes. That is scary. The stock market crashed in 94. That's true. Most countries, at least in their declared military operations, do follow the Geneva Convention. In anything openly declared, they kind of do follow the Geneva Convention because, well, it behooves them to do so. But yeah, in a lot of the shadow, like the stuff the CIA, in the top secret stuff, not always. And to be fair, the U.S. cops are not bound by that. Actually, no police officers, police states, no one internal security are bound by Geneva Convention. Only external wars, which kind of sucks to suck. All right, the U.S. is caught manipulating European and American stock markets. A worldwide financial meltdown results from the news being made public. Interesting. Okay, we didn't have that stock market crash. U.S., European community, and Neo-Soviets start a new space race. Ah, yes, a new space race in the 90s. The new space race kind of got pushed back, and I think that probably seeking economic and military advantages over each other. That would have been a huge driver of technology, too, which is why probably put us back technologically from where they are is probably the secondary space race that never happened. Because bullshit budget cuts. But anyway, Kilimanjaro mass drivers begin construction under joint agreement between Euro Space Agency and Pan-African Alliance. Also, the Pan-African Alliance never panned out. I mean, certainly African countries do cooperate, but there's still not enough cooperation to create an alliance, and certainly not an alliance that's enough to be on par with the European Union. Yeah, the Pan-African Alliance, that's not working out so well. I mean, Ethiopia just ended its civil war. Sudan now just had a civil war. I think South Sudan still has... I mean, they're working on it. They're building themselves up the country, but they still have problems with rebels. South Africa's doing okay, I think. Ish. They need apartheid, so that's something. But yeah, and those are just the ones I know about. Countries like Kenya and Ethiopia are actually... No, Ethiopia had the problem with the rebels in the north. Kenya is doing okay, from what I gather. But yeah, no, a lot of African countries are doing really badly. Democratic Republic of Congo, fun fact, which is neither. But a lot of African countries are not doing well enough to create a Pan-African alliance that works with the European Union. That's just not feasible, and that's, I think, a shame, because people of Africa deserve to have countries that function have governments that function to the benefit of the people and not collapse into bullshit tin horn dictators. But what are you gonna do? Let's see. Collapse of the United States. I mean, I'm sure there is a way to fix that, but I don't know what it is. Colonialism fucked Africa over, and it's not getting better anytime. It's slowly but surely kind of getting better, but not well enough for this. This kind of greatly overestimated how... Also, it didn't factor in China, and its bullshit that it's pulling in various African countries. Yeah, no, China is pulling a lot of bullshit in various African countries, and this probably didn't predict that. Collapse of the United States, weakened by loss of the world stock crash, overwhelmed by unemployment, homelessness, corruption, many local governments collapse or go bankrupt. U.S. government, snarled in staggering deficit and the machinations of Gang of Four, is totally ineffective. Okay, nomad riots. By now, 1 in 4 Americans are homeless. Hundreds of thousands are riot for living spaces throughout the United States. I mean, we have more of a quiet desperation going on than riots, but, I mean, there's stuff going on, but, nomad packs spring up on the West Coast and spread rapidly through the nation. Yeah, we have homelessness camps, not nomad packs, in the West Coast, which, yes, does have a huge problem with homelessness, but they build camps. We don't have nomad gangs going yet. That people living in RVs, sure, but they're usually doing it culturally and not, poor desperate people tend to band together into camps that cause, problems in cities like San Francisco and Seattle. There are dozens of just people living in camps set outside the cities. But yeah, we don't have the whole nomad thing. That's another... They mispredicted what homelessness would do. First appearance of booster gangs. U.S. Constitution suspended. Martial law established. Well, we haven't had that happen yet, but... That's never say never. Luckily, the military didn't like Donald Trump. They weren't as willing to go along with the fascism, so... Manual. Yeah, that's true. At least partially. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But yeah, no, it's an interesting, like, okay, if Africa had recovered better and and teamed up with the European Union against the U.S., if the European Union had propped up South American drug gangs, how much better could they have been? Could they have gotten their hands on nukes? Couldn't we have had a galvanizing thing like 9/11 happen 10 years earlier? Could we have had this and that? Could, if the 9/11 like event had been perpetrated by South America, would we have had more direct military intervention than the war in Afghanistan, which would have led to different outcome if we'd had, instead of all these weird covert Soviet ops where we'd prop up tin horn dictators because they were anti-communist? What if communists hadn't collapsed? What if, it's like, okay, these are the pressure points that we avoided so far. We've only had one plague so far, so there's that. And so these are pressure points we avoided, but it's actually interesting to see how it became this way, and you can see the parallels of, okay, this is where it went off the rails, this is where we're getting there now, when we didn't get there in the 90s, but we're getting there now. It's just interesting to see, let's see. A very limited thermonuclear war. Okay. We haven't had one of those yet. That is, I think, one of the main reasons is we haven't had any nukes go off since the first two. It came close, but I think the world, as of now, has yet to nuke anyone because they kind of see Hiroshima and Nagasaki, let's not push the button. That might change in the next 10, 15, I mean, yeah, and freaking, yeah, we didn't have any nukes thrown around, and I think that helped a lot. Yeah, that's true. They mispredicted corporate behavior, and they predicted more violence and less messing with more subtle stuff. Also, we didn't have any nukes go off, and that was a huge factor. We still haven't since since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Not a single nuclear weapon has been used. Now, Putin has them, and he is starting an all-out war. So, when that happens, does this happen? We don't know. Kim Jong-un also has nukes. Also not really on good terms with the rest of the world, but so far, we're okay. I say so far. Yeah. Maybe. Let's see. Thermonuclear war destroys much of the Middle East. Radioactive fallout spreads around the world. World oil supply drops by half. I mean, Russia's already throwing the natural gas into the wrench works with their bullshit war. So yeah, world oil supply is dropping. Just not the stuff in the Middle East. Rocker boy Manson killed in England. A legendary force of populist rock movement. His stage name was adopted as a term for any musician or other artist who took up gauntlet for political change. I mean, yes, political art. That's just kind of general of par for the course, though. People who take up art for politics. That's not new. That is as old as art has. As long as art has existed, people have taken up art for political change. That's just how art exists, The drought of 98 reduces most of the Midwest to parched grasslands. Between agribusiness corpse and the drought, the family farm all but disappears. 10.5 earthquake shatters Los Angeles. Oh, yeah, Los Angeles. Yeah, that hasn't happened yet. The big one that splits Los Angeles off, that hasn't happened yet. So far so good. Yeah, well, it's not the fall that kills you. It's the sudden stop at the bottom. If you throw yourself at the ground and miss, you fly. That is how Douglas Adams put it, and it's true. Yeah, we haven't had the quake throw off Los Angeles yet. Doesn't mean it won't, but millennium cults begin to appear, predicting an apocalypse on January 1st, 2000. Yes, we had that. Thousands migrate to isolated communities and temples to await the end. I mean, yeah, we had those, not as much as Tycho colony established. A mass drivers constructed to provide raw materials for orbital platforms. Yep. Also, we haven't had any colonies up in space yet. We have a handful of government-run space stations. I mean, I said it was just before 2000. It's been over 20 years since all of humanity was on the Earth. But we haven't been to colonies yet. In the next 10 to 15 years, if things go, yes, that is one of the few things. Elon Musk is, I don't like him. And I think he's not good for the world. But he is pushing forward the space race. So maybe that's one good thing that'll come from him, And other companies are taking up the slack as well, which is good. And people are planning colonies, but we haven't gotten any yet. That's 2030 at the earliest is when we're going to start seeing real colonies develop. Which, Millennium cults run amok on January 1st, an orgy of suicide and violence. Most destroy themselves. Yeah. And San Andreas earthquake. Wait, San Andreas, hang on. San Andreas earthquake. San Andreas fault is in Los Angeles, right? It doesn't reach up that far north. As far as I know. I don't know the exact line of the fault runs, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't run through New Hope or anything like that. They're through Sweden. Then I could be wrong about the way fault line. You know what? We're gonna do Mount Andreas fault. Yeah, it just shows the California. I don't, let's see. The fault line, oh, here we go. Fault lines run, they run, so it runs, I have a map here. Here, we'll, this is, also .gov, so this is, government funded, okay, hang on, give me a sec. Yeah, California drops into the ocean. Right, but Lofen, is, unless I'm mistaken, Lofen is a island off the coast of New Hope, right? Or at least one of the Lofens is. I don't know if you had others, but... Okay, so, I want to... Because I just learned a new thing, and I want to show it to the stream, which includes you and maybe some other friends, which I am... Believe me, if you have other friends who exist, just saying, pop in and say hi in the chat. You are absolutely welcome to do so. I mean, yeah, it probably would be a wise move to, okay, boom. I'm going to serve it as a JPEG. Yep. And then what we can do, you ready? You ready for my stunning feat of technical genius? We go, boop. Image. So this is source for U.S. government website, which means image file. We go to pictures. This one. Okay. Boom. Okay, yes, it's a suburb of New Hope. Yeah. Oh, the tsunami, I see. So the tsunami, pushed immigrants. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, the San Andreas fault line, runs, or the fault line that is, it runs along the coast of California, down through the large chunks of the middle of the ocean, right along, chunks of islands off the coast of Australia. I'm not sure, up near Indonesia, along by Japan, and then I think that's Korea there. I'm not sure what this, and up to Alaska, and then, because it's a loop. Yeah, no, absolutely would cause tsunamis, and, hi, okay, hang on, let me, boop, 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 okay, so, now that we know a little bit about geology, back to alternate history. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, it's 5 o'clock. Okay. Second Central American War. Okay, so wasting plague was 2000. Okay, so yeah, we had our first major pandemic in 2000 instead of 2020. Okay, that makes sense. First extended family poser gangs established. Millennium cults. Okay. The framework for the net put firmly in place with construction of the WorldSat network. I mean, we have the modern internet. I don't know how close it is to the internet that this one imagined, but yeah, the modern internet is a very weird force, and this one, food crash. There you go. Ooh, mutated plant virus wipes out Canadian neo-Soviet crops. U.S. agribusiness crops survived due to biological counteragents. Yeah, neo-Soviets accuse U.S. of biological warfare, which, if the U.S. government had crops, probably not. Collapse really didn't have to happen, really, but people got all complacent, lazy. They were too willing to accept any scrap of shiny new toy the megacorps pawned off on them. They didn't believe that all the militias, terrorists, and private armies would overwhelm the cops, or that the cops would be subordinate and corrupted by the people in power. They didn't even bother to vote. So what do you think was going to happen? I mean, yeah. Also, if you live in the United States, Election Day on Tuesday, remember, I don't know if it'll help, but it's not going to hurt things to go vote. So do it. I mean, yeah, also tsunami is a very real possibility that a large wave like that could go crashing over Asia. Like, that actually makes sense, at least from my own limited understanding of oceanographic physics. That's fair. The food crash, I mean, we're seeing something like the food crash now where, okay, Canada's crops are okay, but Russia and Ukraine, I mean, it's because of the war, not bioweapons, but yeah, a lot of that ex-Soviet territory not having crops because of that is happening now, and we'll see how that goes. Second Central American War, U.S. invades Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. I don't think we're doing that. I think we're kind of calmed it on the invading South American countries, because they're kind of collapsing on their own because of all the shit we did in the 80s. But, yeah, I think U.S. has just kind of cooled it on the collapse. So we don't have that, at least. So, we can avoid that. Cost many American lives and leaves thousands of troops to struggle home on their own. WNS, Media, Tesla, Johansson exposed a secret NSA transcripts the first Central American conflict. Interesting. So the Second Central American War happens, and then the First Central American War gets pulled into the light, which we've had a lot of that happen, and it often doesn't really get that much scrutiny. Oh, hi. Yeah, we have apparently more people joining us, so welcome. For those of you not in the know, we are going through Cyberpunk Red alternate history timeline and comparing it to our own history, and just for funsies, because it's fascinating to me as a nerd, someone who is fascinated by storytelling and for history, like, how did it change? How did it differ? That's what we're doing. Cyberpunk Red is really cool. Yeah, so yeah, we're probably not going to get a Central American War. Gang of Four swept away on a verge of reform. Elections resume, although heavily influenced by megacorporations. So, basically, oh, hi! Eddie Moose. Hello, welcome. Welcome in. We are doing Cyberpunk Red, which is, so Cyberpunk, well, is a genre of literary fiction. Actually, the vibe is a lot like, Necromunda, actually, is a really good example of Cyberpunk vibe. But it's high-tech, and what could have happened if, it was very popular in the 80s. And there was a Cyberpunk, 2020, I think, Cyberpunk Red is a retelling of Cyberpunk 77, which is a video game that came out with that name. It was kind of using a springboard, and it kind of explained a timeline of the future. So it's an alternate history, essentially, what led to a lot more technological things. So I'm kind of going over the history and kind of, comparing it to our history. Kayla's here. That's fun. She is pretty cool. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, we're doing comparative history. I don't, it actually, this timeline this game was originally created in the 80s. So this is the beginning of that cyberpunk wave. So the 80s, which they managed to predict the European Union, which is interesting. And the Eurodollar, the euro, it's just called the euro, but yes, we did have a pan-European country. So 2020 was originally so Cyberpunk 2020 was originally in the 80s, and then it's like, okay, well, where's that? But yeah, so they had a whole history timeline of what happened in the future. And so, yeah, when 2020 hit, they put out, and then 2077 was the video game. They were like, well, okay, well, how does this happen between them? And then how did this get there? And it's kind of interesting, actually, to read the alternate history of the world. They also, a lot of it was the U.S. got swept up in a fascist trouble earlier. What else? We had earlier plagues. Also, the space race kept going. A few other tweaks. Well, you can always play it again. If you finish it, you can start again, and I actually never played 77. Apparently, people really like it. History is fascinating, though. Okay, 2024, first clone tissue grown in vitro, microsutures, sterilizer fields developed. The medical technology also predicted way better medical technology than we have, so that was a driving factor. Yes. Tesla Johansson assassinated in Cairo. The corporate war. Commando raids on cyberspace attacks between the EBM and Orbital Air introduced the world to the edge of direct corporate warfare. Alright, yeah, so... Sig really likes the game, so please be civil in the comments. That's good to know. Alright, please be civil when you talk about the game, because I know that people really like it or really don't, apparently, and it's, yes, please be civil, is all I'll say. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, they also they managed to predict a much earlier, the breakup of the Soviet Union. They predicted differently. There was a couple of nuclear bombings in their history, which luckily hasn't happened yet, although Russia still has them, and Putin is threatening. Like, I'm not saying we won't get another nuclear war, but let's see. And they also said that the war on drugs actually got backed by the European Union, which is an interesting take, because our war on drugs never got backed by the European Union, so they never got their hands on nukes, which means that the great big national disaster that precluded the war on terror, which in our timeline was in 2001. That in this timeline happened in the 90s, and this happened in the 90s and came from South America. So there was a whole South American war, which we didn't get involved in. We got involved in Afghanistan instead, and it kind of petered out a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Afghanistan war was a drain on the U.S., but it didn't inspire the same civil unrest that it did here. Also, they realized that homelessness would be a problem, and they predicted it happening earlier, but the predicted consequence, they said, was that it was going to create these nomadic warriors, and that kind of hasn't happened. We just have these really big camps of homeless people living outside big West Coast cities. Fair enough. Good. I know you are being very civil. I'm not saying you won't. I know you're. I've seen arguments over games get out of hand, and I don't want you guys to fight, basically. So yeah, it predicted a whole period of U.S. history, which really, in our case, didn't happen until the 2016, and it wasn't spread out by subtle people. So it wasn't perpetrated by subtle people, which helped a lot. Trust me, the lack of subtlety on Donald Trump, which is one of his worst features, actually might have been very helpful because, yeah. What was I going to say? So, yeah, that happened. We haven't had any states declare independence yet. I mean, Texas keeps threatening, but hasn't happened yet, so we're good on that front. Like, a lot of this stuff they say happening in the early 2000s, late 90s, is happening, like, now. So, it's an interesting social experiment. But yeah, we also haven't had all-out corporate warfare yet. Oh, right! I heard about that, the Cyberpunk Red game with Luke Gygax, and I kind of want to watch that. Yeah, because Cyberpunk Red is tabletop RPG, is really cool. I am kind of interested to play it, honestly. So 2005, yeah. The internet also came into play. Well, what do they say? The internet. The net was invented. They also didn't have the development of biofuel. I mean, we have some biofuels, but they're not as big a thing. And when was the net? They said framework for the net. Yeah, put firmly in place. Yeah, no, the internet happened a lot earlier than 2001. Let's see. Brain Dance developed at UC Santa Cruz. We don't have that yet. I mean, give it a first human clone grown in vitro, mindless, only lives for 6 hours. All right. The second corporate war. Yeah, that's true. We have a whole ethics thing about cloning in humans. So, the U.S., for example, they don't allow genetic engineering in infants except to prevent degenerative and highly painful diseases, such as cystic fibrosis, which apparently my brother is a carrier for. So they were allowed to do in vitro fertilization, but and like do a genetic tweak on that. But the only thing they could do was make sure that pick out a embryo that didn't have cystic fibrosis. That they weren't allowed to do any other. Legally in the United States, that's all you can do. In other countries, they have less stringent government controls on that, and it's getting cheaper to do in such a way that you can do it. Yeah. That's a thing. We haven't had human clones yet, but we have had sheep's clone, and it doesn't suggest that we couldn't do it for humans. I think Dolly was, 2001? We had the first sheep clone, and she came out fine, for a sheep. I don't know if the complexities of a human, but no one's tried it on humans yet. So that's a fun little thought. But yeah, we do have cloning technology for animals. We have not tried it on humans yet. Second corporate war. So oil and petrochem failed to negotiate with each other over newly discovered oil fields in South China Sea. Began blowing each other up. Instead, even cynical observers are shocked at the level of violence. Yeah, petrochemicals. Oil fields are a level of complication. U.S. assault on Russian weapons platform Mir. That's also failed to predict the SALT treaties, which at the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union, this predicted a very different collapse to the Soviet Union, and so we don't have Soviet weapon or Russian weapon platforms. We do have a lot of Russian nukes that still exist, but the U.S. has not tried to forcibly take them yet. Yeah, no, I'm sure humans can be cloned. The sheep lived successfully. It's just that it hasn't officially been done yet. And so we don't, maybe it has and no one knows about it. But yeah, the ethics around human, there are tighter controls around the ethics of human genetic tweaking than predicted. Um, Orbital war breaks out between the Euros and the Yanks. So U.S. and the European Economic Group, which is the European Union, basically. I mean, they don't call it the European Union, but the version that we created, which, because it did happen, is considered Europe. The question is, though, what happened to all the states that seceded? That's an interesting question. But yeah, at least U.S. got back on track. Eradicate mob rule in Night City. Interesting. So, no more organized crime. That's abortive takeover attempt by U.S. terrorist group of Crystal Palace construction. Interesting. ESA discovers the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, which probably is very similar to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, which was created in 2001 in response to, 9/11. But it probably, I don't think we have a DIA yet. I'm pretty sure that's not an alphabet soup agency that actually exists. Although I could be wrong. I don't know all of the alphabet soup agencies by heart. So 62% of all media broadcasting in the U.S. Yeah, media, I mean, we do have media conglomerations. That is the thing. Human clones are now viable. 2010. I mean, human clones, I don't think... Yeah, no, mass drivers are a terrifyingly powerful weapon. If they exist. And we can't get that much mass going that fast yet. But yeah, mass drivers is a freaking terrifying weapon possibility. Let's see. Human clones are now viable, but no technology exists to implant personalities or intellect into them. They are primarily used to provide body parts for the super rich. See, here's the thing about that. Since the cloning of Dolly, which is the sheep, which is our world's cloning experiments, you would think that a human clone would develop its brain. Like, it would develop the same way a human embryo would develop. And it would have the exact same DNA as the original host, right? But if it had the exact same DNA as the original host, then it would have, or the original whatever they're cloning, then brain development would happen at the same pace. It would be implanted, and the brain development would grow, it would develop a brain. That's, it would be... I don't think we could create mindless clones because the cloning process we use includes all of the prenatal development of a naturally born creature. So the personality would be similar based on genetic factors, but different based on environmental factors of the cloned being. So you would have someone with a very similar personality who just existed. And yes, there might be slight epigenetic factors that would change so that the presentation wouldn't be exactly the same. Like they cloned a cat once and she came out with a complete different fur pattern because of something. But yeah, human clones, there'd be no way we would have brain-dead human clones unless we specifically created them to be brain-dead, because human clones would develop brains the same way human infants develop brains. So you would have to specifically raise them in such a way that they were vastly different than human infants. You would... They said in vitro, so they probably, there'd be no way to develop them in, you'd have to specifically develop them not to have brains for if you cloned humans. There'd be no way we'd end up with brainless clones unless we wanted brainless clones. 9 out of 10 of the first clones, which clones are these? Was this the sheep experiment clones, the early... Oh, pineapple pizza again. Oh, yoy. My point on that is, yes, so blindness clones would not be a thing. So that is a vast difference from our own science and technology. Let's see. Crystal Palace is completed. The ESA now has, I think European Space Agency. I think that's the agreement. So the European Union has, the European Union does have a really good space program now. But they have orbital control, which our space race ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we had a whole period where we didn't do any space tech. That kind of put back our own space development from what it could have been if we'd been actively working on funding space flight and stuff between the collapse of the Soviet Union and fairly recently. And a lot of the fairly recent stuff has been corporate funded. And I think NASA is just building itself up again because it's afraid of corporate. They're pushing each other forward. But Johnny Silverhand concert spirals into a riot in Night City. Riot kills 18, wounds 51. Old Arasaka complex gutted. Right, that's the short story at the beginning of the book. Let's see. Soul Killer virus. Ooh, it originally designed by programmer Alteria Cunningham of ITS as a way to implant recorded personalities into cloned bodies. The transfer technology is a failure, but Arasaka spies learn of its existence and kidnap Cunningham in order to have her develop it into a weapon. Netwatch, previously a private organization, is established worldwide by joint U.S.-Euro theory treaty. Oh, so Netwatch is their internet provider. And they had a treaty between the U.S. and Eurowatch to kind of prop the internet up, which kind of makes sense. First true artificial intelligence developed in Micro Tech's Sunnyvale, California facility. Not Buffy. Sunnydale is a completely separate universe. Ihara Grub transformations redesign the net. During this time, renegade netrunner Rock Bartmoss plants the data crash virus into architecture of the net. 2014. Third Corporate War, 2016. Unknown cyber terrorists attack the networks of corporations worldwide, causing billions of EB, which is euros, euro bucks, but it's equivalent to the euro, and it meaning it's currency developed by the European, the collective European economic zone. So, yeah, the euro. Billions of euros worth of damage in 2016. That doesn't sound like a corporate war. I know, I did. I did read it live on stream. A corporate AV crash released a nanotech plague on the outskirts of Night City. The plague ravages the city for 2 weeks, then mysteriously stops. Nanotech plague, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what banks do, right? Or, stuff like PayPal, where you have they allow a exchange of money, and that creates that that then they skim a little off the top. That's kind of what the deal is. I mean, we have companies like that. Chicago rebuilding project begins. Financed by visionary Dr. Richard Storm of Storm Technologies, the project joins nomad groups under unifying banners of the Aladicado and the Jode families. Euro Aquacorp, CINO, attempts to acquire bankrupt Aquacorp IHAG. Rival Aquacorp OTEC attempts to act as White Knight in the hostile takeover. As both corps line up allies, dangerous war on both sides, on and below the sea, exists. Okay, Aquacorp, I mean, water hasn't gotten that scarce yet. I say yet, because yes, water is going to get scarce. And it's already causing problems with floods in some areas and droughts in others. So yes, there are going to be big corporations that control water. It's going to be a thing that happens. So 2021 is when that, which is, you think you find his body in 2017 in a fridge. But it might not be his body. Interesting. Let's see. Covert operations expand as Arasaka Security and Militech spar to see who will control the outcome of the CINO OTEC war. Raj Bartmoss, Netrunner Supreme, is killed in a corporate raid. 2 weeks later, the dead man switch for his data crash virus activates. Oh, yeah, that's going to be ugly. Fourth Corporate War. Covert operations explode into a shooting war as Arasaka and Militech move frontline troops into battle. The ensuing conflict involves operations all over the globe with heavy combat in major cities worldwide. Yeah, that's the thing about corporate war in this day and age, in our timeline, is that they try to stay away from big cities, which is very useful to the population of those large cities who generally do not get caught in corporate war zones. But it, oh yeah, Nestle has been stealing. I don't even think they're stealing water in the same stealing, because I think they got a deal with the state of California, so I think it's fully legal. But yeah, they are hoarding water along the California coast, and it is bullshit. That is a thing, but So far, that's the closest we've got. And they're... okay. Chicago rebuilding project collapses as Arasaka corporate factions detonate virus bombs in an effort to deny the city to the Militech side. Well, yes, that's true. I know about the Nestle water thing. And I'm pretty sure it's not theft as it's, I think they have a deal with the state of California. I don't think it's officially theft. Of course, it's wrong, but that doesn't necessarily qualify it as theft, because theft has to be legal. In nature, I'm pretty sure. So 23, total breakdown of international trade, container ships, 7 hour, okay. So, the data crash virus now infects 78% of the net. Saburo Arasaka sets out to create a secure database of uninfected knowledge in the new Arasaka Towers facility in Night City. Fed up with the fighting, high riders at O'Neill 2 declare independence, using deltas and scavenge mass drivers to drop dozens of lunar rocks and other artillery at key sites all over the planet, causing widespread death and destruction. US and Japan officially recognize the new government. Oh, so one of the colonies, the space colonies, falls apart. Or declares independence and causes problems to make it happen, which is interesting, for sure. So 23, total breakdown of international trade, container ships and air travel have been totally disrupted. Supplies and food sit on docks worldwide, unable to reach stores, factories, or suppliers. Many megacorps totally collapse. I mean, we've seen collapses in supply lines during the 2020 pandemic, and still, it's still, we're doing okay, but there are still a lot of problems in the supply line that we haven't had a total great global trade collapse yet, but yeah, we're seeing shades of this. And the 20th of the Night City Holocaust. An incursion team led by Solo Morgan, Blackhand, and Rocker Boy Johnny Silverhand attempt to destroy the Arasaka secure database in Arasaka Towers facility. During the assault, the aerial denial nuclear devices detonated. Oh, God, they had a nuke, which destroys most of central Night City. Over 500,000 people are killed. 500,000. Okay. 500,000. I just want to say, there's a nuclear bombing in a major city, and only 500,000 people are killed. That is... I mean, I don't know. Night City is intentionally, I'm sure. Yep, there we go. We need more light. Oh, interesting. So there are... Okay, I want to know more about that, but later. We're gonna have to do serious, intensive... Well, okay, but... Hang on. We're gonna have to do serious... You know with that. Data. To find out about the world. Okay, if you skip to page 257, you can learn a little bit about the time of the Red, which is 2077-ish. But I'm questioning how we got there. Sorry. In any case, tactical warhead. Okay, I think my friend is watching the stream. Here, I'll switch this off so it doesn't do the thing, but but even if, he doesn't have a Twitch account, so he doesn't actually, ooh, I want to know about all this stuff, so a tactical nuclear warhead, small stuff, but even still, okay, only 500,000 people died. Consider the population of a modern city. Now, granted, small nukes in a 500,000, a major city. Now, Boston has a population of 800,000. Boston is not... Now, we don't know where Night City is, to be fair, but a major city in a world like this. Now, granted, the population might be less than it would be otherwise, but I feel like this was people in the 80s failing to understand how populous U.S. cities could get. Maybe that's just me, but maybe I'm just like the numbers seem off for a bombing of a major city. Now, especially if there was a urban overcrowding due to Rust Belt dropping population, which is a thing that's happening. But 500,000 is only 500,000, which is a lot of people to be murdered in a single night. I agree, and tragedy, but it's like, well, 250,000 die in the resulting aftermath. So that's, we do? Night City has a geographical location? Alright, Northern California. Okay, so right around where San Fran is. Hang on a second. So, San Francisco... let me just check something. Which actually makes sense, oh, dang, San Francisco is only like 815,000. So, okay, so, granted, a small new 500,000. I'm comparing it in population to cities like in Asia where you have like Tokyo or Shanghai, that kind of population density. Now, modern San Francisco only has 815,000 people total. So, I mean, that's probably only in the city proper, not the area surrounding it, which is a whole other situation. Although if it was a small nuke and only really took out the city, of course, you can't really have a small nuke. Coronado Bay, so closer to where Sacramento is. Because, yeah, Sacramento is right, out of curiosity. Only 500,000 people there now. Okay, so that makes a little more sense. Still, it seems a little up, not quite, like, I feel like the population would have been higher, would have had higher population density than modern Sacramento because of all the problems that were caused, and it seems like it's a more modernized city than, but maybe that's just, also the population might be bigger now because of fewer agricultural collapses later, as opposed to earlier, which they had the earlier agricultural collapses. Nationalized, ooh. Alright, so, over 500,000 people killed, another 250,000. Militech is nationalized by President Kress by expedient of reactivating Militech CEO Jen Donald Lindsay's Reserve Commission. Oh, he had a Reserve Commission, they just... Dang. Atmospheric particles from the nuclear blast in Night City, as well as debris from orbital rock strikes, conventional explosives and wartime burning, annihilation of the cities and agricultural areas, create an eerie red pall over the skies worldwide. For nearly 2 years, skies are tinged with a bloody red color, which eventually dies down to brilliant red sunrises and sunsets throughout the next decade. So the Fourth Corporate War ends in 2025. That's true, all the starvation and plagues. The population of the world is probably way... Well, I don't think it went down fully. I think we're still technically going up a little bit, but it certainly isn't... and we don't have the gangs and corporate warfare killings, but we do have quite a bit of BS going on. We still have the population going. Plus, that kind of strain on population... depends. Includes a 3-year wrap-up as pockets of fighting are quelled by the Militech and national armies. Well, there's only one nuke dropped during the war. The world's infrastructure is severely impacted, although not destroyed. Net is officially down. Yeah, the destruction of the internet. That would be a huge thing for us, anyway. Alt Cunningham establishes the ghost world in the ruins of bio-destroyed city. Statistic Metro. Okay. I'm getting text from my friend explaining his own take on what nukes are happening because he's watching the stream too. Which is kind of cool. But what was I going to say? Alt Cunningham establishes the ghost world in the ruins of bio-destroyed city. Ghost world. Japanese government almost breaks down by repudiating Arasaka. National face is saved. Arasaka's reduced to a Japan-only corporation for the next decade. European Union is mostly restored. Diaspora. Groups dispatched from wrecked cities now set out to reclaim nearby cities abandoned since the collapse of the 90s. They are supported by nomads who set up convoys between cities. This is till 2030. Massive looting of old tech and abandoned storehouses. Only scattered courts are still functioning and only on a very reduced basis. Local businesses are left to take up the slack, often with resources plundered from abandoned megacorp facilities. Very limited VPN within corporate parks. Alls occasionally creep into the wrecked city's old nets to seek out other AIs. Alright. Yeah. Creep into wrecked city's old nets to seek out other AIs to join. Ghost World is just AIs. Okay. Arasaka breaks into 3 warring factions. The Kiji, Green Peasant faction, headed by Hanako Arasaka. The Hato, Dove faction, helmed by supporters of Michikado Arasaka, Kei's youngest daughter. And who is a U.S. citizen instead allies with the new U.S. government. Who as a U.S. citizen instead allies with the U.S. government. And Taka, Hawk faction, led by Saburo's rebel son, Yorinobu. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just all AIs and uploaded consciousnesses and just vibing. The remaining United States is now a functional dictatorship under President Elizabeth Crest's state of emergency. Resettlement of suburban Night City, 30 to 35. In time, Night City Central will be rebuilt, but for now, the foothills and the small cities around Night City are overpacked with refugees fleeing the radioactive ruins of the corporate zone. Nomads now operate ports, container ships. Corporations are now mostly local, but as nomads establish trade routes, corps branch out regionally. Start of city nets, local VPN. I'm guessing VPNs are not the same way VPNs are now. Well, I guess they're the same thing, but they're not interconnected the same way. Established in some of the reclaimed cities, these networks are usually air-gapped with only limited and strongly controlled access between them. Netwatch oversees the development of a new series of networks with corporate backing. So, local networks as opposed to the Internet of Things, which is what we have now, where everything is connected, which was what they had, which collapsed, which it hasn't collapsed for us yet. That's the thing. Like Elvis sightings, rumors arise that rocker boy Johnny Silverhand's body has been kept in cold storage in a body bank in the wreckage of Old Night City. Although this is never substantiated, the claim that it has been stored there by a full-body conversion fan of his who recovered it from Arasaka blast site. So, in 2030, Night City reconstruction starts. Gigatons of fill are shifted from radioactive ruins of Central City. Much of the old bay is filled in. Alright, so 35 to 45. First wave cities start reclamation under support from local governments and remaining megacorps. These first wave cities are ones that require only a limited amount of resources to rebuild. We have no United States until we have a country again. President Elizabeth Crest. While local elections resume, there will be no national election until a treaty exists between free states and the remaining United States. Dang. Interesting. So they don't hold national elections until... Dang, that's an interesting pull. To try to get the free states back by forcing them into holding the rest of the country's elections hostage. Rebuilding of old factories by corporations and other individuals begin to replace lost tech. New court starts to rise from the wreckage of the Fourth Corp War. Rumors spread the legendary Solo Morgan Black Hand has been spotted with various first wave cities. Netwatch attempts to clear out the Rabbids and reestablish the old net. After losing a 3-year battle, they give up and shut down all the major nodes into the old net, although some netrunners still try to go there to loot the abandoned systems. Establishment of first data pools, information servers, and exchange systems designed for open use within the limits of a city. Data pools produce free, open content created through the collaborative effort of a community of users. In design, they're similar to the hyper stack page system attempted and abandoned for the net in the early 90s. Rise of the first mega buildings to handle homeless population. These are all-in-one arcologies designed to rapidly create safe, habitable zones, which is kind of clever. Beginning the first new factories replacing, upgrading, or repairing old and scattered tech. And then 45 is the present. The time of the red is almost biblical sometimes. A lot of the big stuff went down, and the world was changed, even more than it had been by the collapse. Me? I see myself as a modern-day Homer. You know, the Greek poet. He wrote about how his entire world was blown apart. Well, I do the same thing, only instead of using a harp, I got a synth deck. Yeah. Alright, so Cyberpunk Red takes place in 2040s. Which is after everyone is rebuilding after this huge collapse, which is interesting. Definitely. And very cool. And we've been streaming for 3 hours because of a whole host of reasons. Yeah, 2 hours. Hang on. I actually have an exact time. Which we are... Yeah. Alright, so I'm thinking that we had a whole stream on the history of the Cyberpunk. Let's pop it down a little bit so we can see everything. So what have we got? Broken World of 2020, which is the alternate 2020. Let's see. Unified Europe represented the best option for the new century, although some nations of the Eurobloc, Greece, parts of Central Europe, Britain, lagged behind the most successful nations, Germany, France, Italy. Italy is a great country and has some of the best food and culture and art, and used to be a great empire. The idea that it's the most successful in 2020 is, no, I don't mean to mock the Italian people. They're great. But it did have a lot of problems. It didn't get up there with the Germany of, in terms of Germany, in terms of solid, dependable, economically successful nations in Europe. Germany is one of the best right now. But, yeah, Greece, Central Europe, Britain, yeah. I would put Italy with those instead. Sorry, no, it's not. I don't mean to laugh at Italy. It's a great country. It's just not what you would consider the most successful country, Sentiment inequity was present, but in day-to-day, unlike American counterparts, a European citizen could depend on regular meals, clean air and water, and a regular, if not boring, job to go to. Yeah, no, that's true. Even today. There was a roof overhead and crime was kept to a minimum. In some ways, unified Europe was like corporate Beaverville, safe, controlled by the cores, and a little boring until you got where the rich and powerful dwelt. It's true. A lot of the current... England's a little tricky, but a lot of the current European countries do have this sort of socialism light. The one in Lofen in your world is similar to Mega Building. Makes sense. But yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. So the whole world... Russian politics in the early 2000s was dominated by Sovietskaya Partia, or New Soviet Party, NSP, after the 1999 general election overthrew the incompetent Russian Federation established under Gorby. They overthrew Gorby's... I mean, okay, granted, the just post Soviet Russia was yeah, no, it did not do well. Boris Yeltsin, who, to be fair, was he tried. He was definitely tried. He didn't do so well. So yeah, okay. Novosovietska. Okay, so the Russian overthrew the Russian Federation that Gorby established. Only ruling party to control the government since then. Sovietized economic and social reforms dominated the majority of the population under directives of Centralny Organ, Central Authority, rotating council of kleptocrats who controlled the major state industries. The media Lyle Thompson once described the NSP as a capitalist crony kleptocracy with the nice shiny democratic cover removed. I mean, yeah, that's kind of what the Russian Federation has become. So yeah, that whole, yeah, okay. So, but it's interesting. They overthrew the Russian Federation, called it Soviet again, and interesting. That is an interesting take on what... So, also, Gorby... Okay, friend. Symbolic shit show. Yes. Perhaps that is correct. 2020 couldn't predict corporations doing warfare through banking back then. Yeah, that's true. They're much less on the much less of the open fighting, at least in cities, and more of the subtle sabotage bullshit, which, you know. Asia. While the rest of the world struggled through the ravages of the late 20th century, the nations of Asia were well prepared for the vicissitudes of climate change and environmental degradation. China, Japan, and Korea rapidly concluded that coal burning and oil were too costly. Sorry, China is clinging to coal now, so it's kind of interesting here. Japan and Korea absolutely are globally, technically advanced and do have better green industries than a lot of places. China, not so much. Too costly to continue basing their expansion on, instead shifted to creating vast fields of oceanic algae that were easily converted into the CHOOH2 process of the United States. Yeah, no, that we haven't had a whole biofuel revolution because it's based on ethanol, based on corn, and that doesn't really work energy efficient wise. Sugarcane is better option for that, but it never really caught on. And I mean, oceanic algae is a great idea for it, but we haven't implemented that yet. The quantum shift also provided more food for the Asian nations' dense populations, although strong, some say draconian birth control programs, the one-child policy, yeah, and some nations also helped reduce excess populations. Crowded and teeming with people, the cities of Japan, China, Korea, and the Philippines still managed to sustain high levels of food security, safety, and comfort, even if many lacked the personal freedoms common in other nations. I mean, that's fair. A lot of, that's actually kind of not an dissimilar to what happened in Asia. I mean, China. Yeah, China. It did not go that route, and yeah, they're kind of paying the price for that. And the population control. The population control of Japan is actually entirely natural. Not natural, but there's no big legal restriction like the one-child policy in China. It just kind of shrunk because people had less babies. As a cultural thing. And Korea, I'm not sure on, but I know. And the Philippines definitely doesn't have. Was it not Malaysia? There was Singapore is a big example of population control legal, but the Philippines definitely not. Yeah, Philippines is doing okay, actually. My knowledge of Asian history is not the greatest in current, so. Meltdown of the 90s, oh, yeah, the big nuke in the 90s that didn't happen in our timeline. Chad and the United Arab. Okay, Chad is not in the. Okay, Libya, Chad. How far north is Chad? Chad is not. I wouldn't argue. I would. All right, we need to get a map of. We're getting a map of Africa up here, and we're gonna. Because I don't. I know Chad is. I think Chad's. Okay. Modern political map of Africa. This one. Chad. Yeah, Chad is. Okay, it's yes, but I wouldn't have. Okay. Let me show you the map and well. This is the map we're working with here. Let me we're cutting off large chunks of the south of the continent, but we are more focused on the north because Middle East. Okay, let me hang on. I'm getting up a map and we're gonna yeah, we're doing geopolitical analysis of Cyberpunk, but you know what? That's cool because geopolitical analysis is fun. At least I think so. My technological skill is now I have a map of chunks of Africa. Okay, so the countries they Egypt, Syria, and Israel. Okay, so Iran, Libya, Iraq, Chad, United Arab Emirates as radioactive fields of glass. Only Egypt, Syria, and Israel survived intact. Granted, okay, let me bring up one map, and then we're gonna go grab another map of more concentrated in the region, and I want to see because Chad is really far south. It's not as far south as I thought it was, but image. Here, let me find a map. Here, We're bringing up world maps. We're doing geopolitical analysis with my, this one. Okay. Okay, so, see, Chad is a lot further south than Liberia. Okay, so Egypt, okay, so, hang on. Which ones? Libya and Chad, so those two, and Iraq, Iran, and the Egypt, Syria, and Israel. So, Syria, the map is, a lot of these countries aren't on the map. Oh, Iraq and Iran are on this map. Okay, so Iraq and Iran are here. Then we got Syria is here. Then Turkey, I mean, so it kind of, Egypt. Like, okay, if Iraq, Iran, they didn't mention Saudi Arabia. So Iraq and Iran and Syria are nuked. That's, hang on, let me see if we can make this a little bigger. So, okay, that's still readable. Also, hi, I'm still here. I'm just invisible right now. We're working on this. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, yes. So, my point on this, let me re-visibilize the map, is that if Iraq, Iran, Syria, right? Israel is not, Jordan. No, it's right there. Hang on. So, Egypt, so it's right between Iraq, Iran, Syria, which, hang on. Let's see. It says Iraq, Iran, Libya, and okay, yeah, and UAE. Egypt, okay, so Egypt, Syria, okay, Egypt and Syria and Israel survived. So the question is, how the frick did they bomb? They basically bombed two sides, I guess, of, okay, so if Egypt, Israel, hang on. Here we go. Egypt is here. Then we got Egypt, Israel, which is right next to Egypt, and Syria, which is right north. So Jordan, okay, so Egypt, Israel, and Syria, this little strip here. And then Chad and Libya got bombed, okay. And then Iraq, Iran on this side. Iraq, Iran, what's the other one? Okay, Iraq, Iran, Chad, and Libya. And UAE, which is, know this or not, I probably don't. So UAE is, UAE is on the other side of Saudi Arabia. So what happened to Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Oman? Were they swallowed up by the UAE? Okay, UAE was just bombed separately. So this side of Egypt and Israel, Syria, this kind of Mike Pondsmith. Interesting. I mean, I wouldn't say one of the few successful. I mean, there are others, but he is certainly more major than most. Yeah, Cyberpunk Red is certainly more major than, say, what was the one? There's a brilliant one, but it Shadow, hang on, I bought a copy because of, Swordsfall, which, this is a lore book from Swordsfall, which is a really cool RPG, set in non-colonialized Africa, kind of, Tikor, which is, kind of based on non-colonialized Africa in the modern era with magic. It's kind of awesome. Brandon Dixon. But yeah, no, it is very much a smaller and less prolific than, what's the one? But there are a bunch of them, are like Coyote and Crow, which is, I backed on Kickstarter. I bet I have copies somewhere. Either I got one, on the, either I have one coming in the mail, or I got one through Drive-Thru RPG and never claimed it, because I have a lot of those. But yeah, Swordsfall, shout out to that. Pretty cool. Completely irrelevant. But yeah, no, Mike Pondsmith is pretty awesome. I've never, yeah. But yeah, no, the question is, why were they bombed on each side of that? How did those particular countries they kind of have a safety bubble, and what happened to Saudi Arabia? That's the big question of, okay, so if you look at the map, UAE is kind of like not way over there, but it's got Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Oman with it. So how did that chunk survive? Qatar, well, that's a whole other situation. Like, how did UAE get bombed? This part they never explained. In Jordan, like, what happened? Was that bombed as part of the Iraq-Iran one? Swordsfall? It's pretty cool. There's this actual one I have a copy of somewhere. The lore is fascinating. the bank heist, it was like a sub book, and then there's a couple of fun little ones. Mike Pondsmith or Brandon Dixon, because I know he's out and about on as well. Okay, so Middle East Meltdown has a weird bubble that we can't figure out, but Afrofuturism in the High Frontier. Once a fractured continent feuding countries under a bewildering array of dictators, democracies, and socialist states, new and united Africa was reborn. Okay, this is the thing with the Pan-African Alliance and the space program. This was how it got to be. This is interesting. How it because it is, at least in our timeline, still a fractured feuding continent under a bewildering array of dictators, democracies, and socialist states. That's kind of how you would describe Africa now. The United Africa was reborn as many nations of Central Africa banded together to negotiate with Europeans who sought to build the Kilimanjaro mass drivers. So it was like Colonial 2.0, but they actually had a proper Pondsmith. Good to know. I have not heard his voice, but I'm sure it's very cool. But okay, so they wanted to do, and rather than having a whole colonialism 2.0, the countries actually managed to have an equal say, which is brilliant. Now I know why he probably wrote a United Africa. That makes sense. Which is not an impossibility. At some point, the African people are, there are people there who could make it happen. It just hasn't yet. They kind of got screwed over by colonialism, and it hasn't bounced back yet. Not that it won't, but yeah, no, this is an interesting. So they wanted to build the Kilimanjaro mass driver, which they wouldn't have done if the new space race hadn't happened. And because of that, they were able to negotiate a better deal. And because they didn't have China with the stupid predatory bullshit that they were peddling, because China had its own green energy as opposed to whatever it's got now. But at least partially able to do, like, actually have revitalized economy, which, and so to band it together to negotiate with the Europeans, and then that brought industry, and that works pretty well. As the problems of Central African states grew, other nations across the continent joined in this Pan-African Alliance. The Pan-African Alliance establishes the strongest of all footholds in space. Nearly 1/3 of all space construction workers were African, and majority of spaceport facilities and construction areas were built on African soil. I mean, we're seeing that now. There are at least a couple of African countries that have, if not, U.S.-level space programs. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but I know there's at least several that have, space programs. So it's not an impossibility. This is probably Uganda. Yeah, Uganda and Zimbabwe are putting up satellites tomorrow. I have a source who would be in chat, I'm sure, if he had a proper Twitch account. But there are African nations that have space programs, so it makes sense, kind of. The resulting population evolved into a national group called the High Riders, a space-based high-tech society linked by Pan-African roots and a determination to never be victims of colonial oppression again, which is a vibe, honestly. The High Riders, so it's not a national group as such. It's a collection of various groups. Probably Belters, kind of that vibe of, at least from what I can get. Let's see. Population, High Riders, a space-based high-tech society, yeah. Linked by Pan-African roots and determination never to be victims of colonial oppression again. Then we got Central and South America, which... lengthy wars with the United States. Central America emerged as a strong union of independent states working under a pact of mutual cooperation. The U.S. expelled from all but the Panama Canal Zone, which still holds by sheer military force against ongoing guerrilla aggression. Yeah, the Panama Canal. That is a flashpoint. Yeah, that makes sense. In South America, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil rose to become de facto leaders in the Organization of American States. OAS. Okay, that's what OAS is. Having thrown the U.S. out after their actions in the South Am Wars. The OAS maintained its place as a major world power on the level of the European Union. Good for them. And then, who is this? Some soldier. Let me pop this open so I can see. Adrian Mark is the artist. It does not provide a specified, probably a soldier in the Central American Wars, perhaps. I don't know. And then America, the Eagle Falls. Sloppy pollution controls. Yeah. Like we don't have those. Massive acid rain, poisoning drinking water and crops. During the last years of the 20th century, series of ecological disasters. Hang on. Okay, it is 6 o'clock. And, I think we are getting... yeah. This is one of, like, a longer stream than I usually do, because alternate history is fascinating, and Cyberpunk Red is amazing and well written, actually. And it's kind of cool to compare the histories of, okay, what could they have predicted? Like, it was interesting to see, like, based on what it started as in the 2020s, as it started in the 80s, right? So they had to, how they extrapolated the history of that, and how their predictions failed, what factors in our world changed what would have happened, and how their world differs, and they got more tech, and they got nukes actually being used, which, yeah, but different areas of the world got different things, and they predicted certain things that didn't happen, and so you can kind of see the divergence points, and that's fascinating for me, personally. I'm a big fan of alternate history. So yeah, that is pretty cool. We will definitely do more Cyberpunk Red streams at some point, because Cyberpunk Red is cool. Next Saturday, fun fact, we are doing a one-shot. We have, at the very least, 2 players, other than me. Possibly 2 more who are kind of on the fence, so we'll see. So it should be fun. We're going to do Rogue Trader. We're going to go with the 41st Millennium, Far Future, see how that goes. Yeah, and it's going to be a good time. There's going to be shenanigans, and an interesting thing about the 41st Millennium is they failed to explain exactly how the Dark Age technology came about. So they could avoid this kind of historical split in their timeline because, well, it's just the Dark Age technology hasn't happened yet. And because all the records were lost, there's no, like, it's not like, you know what I mean? It's the Dark Age technology could happen. I mean, if we fail to build a space age, it'll be kind of telling, but, you know, the Dark Age technology, they kind of keep it vague enough and far enough in the future that they you know, but, it's interesting, that's all. Okay, we're good, we are solid. Thank you all for coming, to the stream. I have a Discord server, which you may well know, some of you are on. I'm gonna pitch the link, which is very cool. We have a good time, always. Johan Johansson the 45th. Yes, that is who Sig will be playing. Who we actually created on stream, if you guys remember. So, and I think the video of that might have been lost to time. Some of the videos I haven't managed to get to YouTube before they disappeared off Twitch. Or it might be one of the ones that's still technically private, because reasons. I don't put them all up. Originally, I send them over to YouTube, and then they're hidden until I publish them officially, and then I keep forgetting to publish them. And then some of them just got lost on Twitch. But, yeah, Johan Johansson the 45th was created on stream, so that's fun times. Yeah, there's the Discord server. It has links to fun stuff, to my Ko-Fi, in case you're, you know, I don't strain yourselves, but a little extra coin could be good. You know, all sorts of fun stuff. So, we're gonna raid, Vancouver by Night. I believe, they're playing Vampire the Masquerade. And generally, are kind of awesome, so we're gonna raid them. And, let's do it. Yeah. All of you should come along. It's gonna be a good time. And I will see you all later. Tomorrow, we'll see.